I think it's fair to say that Hollywood's been on a rough streak over the past several years, with most of their big studio movie releases feeling like they've been churned out of a conveyor belt. Overblown budgets, predictable plots, and political propaganda is mostly what we get these days, and I think audiences are already fed up with it, especially if we look at the lackluster ticket sales for a lot of these so-called tentpole films. So when I heard about Novocaine, a smaller budget offbeat action movie, I was really hoping that it would deliver something different. And now that I've seen it, I'm ready to share my thoughts with you on it without giving away any major spoilers, but before we dive in, please make sure to like and subscribe as it would really help my review get noticed, which I would of course greatly appreciate. The premise of Novocaine is pretty straightforward, and if you've caught any of the ads for it, you probably know the general direction. Jack Quaid plays Nathan Kane, a mild-mannered assistant bank manager with a rare genetic medical condition. He can't feel pain. The story shifts gears when robbers storm the bank, commit some violent acts, and kidnap a young woman that Nathan is, fond of? Suddenly, this regular guy who's not exactly built for heroics decides to take matters into his own hands, making him an unlikely hero. And it turns into a quirky rescue mission where his inability to feel pain becomes his edge, helping him push through obstacles despite his lack of fighting skills or tough guy demeanor. The movie then takes a few twists and turns which you'll probably be able to spot from miles away, but overall, it pretty much stays true to what the marketing promised. A silly, preposterous action flick with a dash of humor. It's also not a long movie, which I appreciate, so it doesn't outstay its welcome. With that being said, this movie isn't exactly high art, but to its credit, Novocaine knows that, and it keeps things rather simple, and in parts, it actually even reminded me of a superhero movie. Because in a way, Nathan's medical condition is like his superpower, but at the same time, his kryptonite is that he can still get hurt and injured even if he doesn't feel it. So throughout the movie, he's gotta keep going even when he's battered and bruised, as he finds new sources of energy, which also gives the movie a bit of that chaotic, Crank-style vibe, only much less manly. And while I personally prefer action movies that have a bit more testosterone in them, Novocaine does work as something of a quirky action comedy. And surprisingly, Jack Quaid gives a rather solid lead performance as Nathan, possibly even his best performance to date. More often than not, children of known actors end up being less talented than their parents, but in this movie, Jack Quaid proves that he does actually have real acting skills. On the one hand, he's got Dennis Quaid's rough around the edges vibe, but it's mixed with a bit of Meg Ryan's charm and comedic capabilities, and it totally works here. As sort of an atypical action hero, I think that Quaid does fit with the movie's overall tone. He blends humor, quirkiness, and just enough grit to make Nathan a solid everyman character. Prior to this movie, I had only seen Amber Midthunder in the movie Prey, where she was decent enough acting-wise, but I never believed she could actually take on a predator with her bare hands. In that sense, I think Novocaine gives her a much better role, more grounded, more likable, more feminine, and without superhuman strength. And while this movie showing a romance between a man and a woman shouldn't be any kind of novelty, it's something Hollywood has been avoiding for years for some reason, so it is rather refreshing to see. In a supporting role, this movie also features Jacob Batalon, best known as Ned from the Spider-Man movies, popping in here and there for some well-timed comic relief. He's not overused, just kind of sprinkled in to keep things light, but he does certainly do what's expected of him. And as I was watching this movie, I couldn't help but feel encouraged by its production and the overall work of co-directors Dan Burke and Robert Olson. These guys are a directing duo known for smaller indie horror films like Villains and Significant Others, and even though Novocaine reportedly had only a rather modest budget of $18 million, it appears to be their most expensive movie to date. Filmed in South Africa to keep costs down, it's a step up for Burke and Olson without being a reckless financial leap, and I can appreciate that. So many times in recent years we've seen big studios handing smaller indie movie directors hundreds of millions of dollars, like Chloe Zhao with The Eternals or Bong Joon-ho with Mickey 17, and then acting shocked when they fail. To everybody's benefit though, Burke and Olson appear to have gone through the opposite process. They've honed in their craft on leaner projects, which taught them how to solve problems using creative solutions, and you can feel that scrappy energy here, which I think is a big plus for Novocaine. Because when you don't have $200 million to throw at CGI, you've got to work harder, get clever with storytelling, lean on your cast without a bunch of useless filler. I think that this is a much better approach than your typical bloated Hollywood blockbuster that feels too corporate and soulless. Novocaine does seem to have a more personal touch, like the directors actually had a clear vision for what they were trying to do. It's not perfect by any means, but it's got heart and hustle, and that goes a long way. If I had to point out any real weaknesses the movie has, it's that perhaps it could have been a little less predictable in parts, even though it still accomplishes what it sets out to do. Another very minor issue is that towards the end of the movie, there's a rather annoying, obligatory white man privilege joke that certainly didn't need to be there. While I do have thick skin and perhaps would have chuckled at that joke about 10 years ago, these days, that kind of humor has been so overplayed that it just comes off as unnecessary cringe. It doesn't ruin the movie or anything, but man, we gotta move forward from all this type of preaching. So at the end of the day, is Novocaine worth your time? Well, if you're looking for some sophisticated, high-concept drama, then it may not be a good fit for you. But if you're looking for a few hours of undemanding, dumb, escapism fun, then it'll certainly get the job done. I've noticed that on Rotten Tomatoes, this movie has some unreasonably high scores. I wouldn't say that it's spectacular. If I had to give this movie a score, I suppose I would give it something like a 74 out of 100. It's absurd yet comical and unpretentious, but I guess not every movie needs to be a masterpiece. And in a sea of overproduced flops, Novocaine feels like a win for smaller scale movies with an old school filmmaking type of approach. It's a reminder that a tight budget and clear idea can still entertain. So yeah, maybe it's not worth all the hype, but it's a rather pleasant ride, one you'll enjoy in the moment and probably won't really think about much later. But if you enjoyed this review from an independent reviewer like myself, please make sure to hit the like button and subscribe, as it would really help my channel grow. Thanks for watching, my friends. Thank you, and good day.
I am such an awesome guy. I make so many videos. But I'm